Thank you for joining us today, and let's get started. So there is a lot of innovation happening around building sustainable models to support funding of open access content. In particular, library consortia and publishers of open access content are collaboratively exploring new business models that attempt to balance the imperatives of multiple stakeholders and the need for more sustainable OA funding models that support shared principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've all come together today to talk about the open access model that we are exploring and what we are learning, and then where we want to go from here. So first, I want to introduce us and describe who we each represent so you may better understand the respective lenses we look through in this space. So Morris York is Director of Library Initiatives at the Big Ten Academic Alliance, an academic consortium of 15 Research One universities spread across the upper US from Nebraska to New Jersey. By the numbers, the Big Ten Academic Alliance community represents over 600,000 students, over 50,000 faculty, and maintain 114 million library volumes. The consortium participates in a wide range of academic and research collaborations where the libraries are the key focal point for the joint initiatives. Their focus, collaborating at scale to increase both impact and efficiency. Then we have Sarah Ruhi, who is Director of Strategic Partnerships at PLOS, a nonprofit open access science, technology, and medicine publisher with a library of open access journals and other scientific literature under an open content license. They were early leaders in the movement for OA alternatives to subscription journals. PLOS launched their first journal in 2003 and currently publish 7 journals. Is that right, Sarah? Okay, and then me. I am Cheryl Allaire. I am a strategist for the Content and Scholarly Communication Initiatives team at Lyrasis, a 501c3 nonprofit membership organization that represents roughly 1,000 libraries, museums, and archives. Lyrasis' mission is to support enduring access to the world's shared academic, scientific, and cultural heritage through leadership in open technology, content services, digital solutions, and collaboration with archives, libraries, museums, and knowledge communities worldwide. So that's who we are, and we'll go ahead and get started with Morris.
All right, great, thanks, Charlotte. Hello, everybody. Really great to see everybody, but without quite seeing everybody. There's a lot of people here, which is fantastic. So I want to just start off the conversation, and we'll each move through a slide here, a little bit of encapsulation of what we're doing. And what we really like to do is to open up conversation and enter into questions and things like that. So just a quick profile of what the Big Ten Academic Alliance is looking at. And I'm going to approach this from the perspective of consortial action, sort of how we're looking at opening knowledge and at the OA landscape. And this is particularly driven and accelerated, of course, as is for so many of us by the pandemic. And the question is, how do we rapidly accelerate? There were trajectories already in place and things already moving. And the current moment has really accelerated the need to think about how we move the needle even faster and farther. So from this perspective of collective action, so how do we build a collective action strategy at scale towards opening knowledge? So just a few key points of the approach across the Big Ten that we're taking. So this is 15 institutions. We're not part of any single system. They're all independent institutions and have been focused on joint collaboration for over 60 years. Where we're in is a flexion point, a pivot from acting as a collection of institutions to thinking and acting as a whole. So rather than University of Iowa, University of Chicago, Northwestern University, et cetera, saying this is the Big Ten Academic Alliance acting together. And the reason for joining together as one, as a whole in that kind of action, is to be able to have effect at scale in reimagining the systems, the structures, and the models fundamentally that underpin what we're doing in scholarly communications, with publishing, with reading, et cetera. This is really what's become present for us, is we need a new economy. We need a new way of thinking about things, bringing some of the strategies that we've used in the past, the approaches we've used in the past, will not be sufficient to engage with the present moment. So in establishing that strategic direction, the second step then is to articulate strategic priorities. What are we really trying to do? And here's one way of looking at how we might, right? This is all in process. It's like, how might we imagine this? And this will all evolve as we move. But here's three possible ways, right, that we might imagine things, is to have impact in three different spheres: an economic, a social, and a political. In the economic, of course, this might be one strategy, is we're going to drive down cost. We need to drive down costs for institutions. The pressures are too great. The future is uncertain, and as an economic strategy, we'll approach that. As a social strategy, increasing the value for faculty and researchers. It can't just be an economic argument. There has to be a social and cultural perspective as well. We have to place faculty and researchers at the center. These are R1 universities, so where students would play into this picture, all kinds of other stakeholders, and focus here on increasing the value to faculty and researchers and making a real impact and a measurable difference in their daily lives. And then a political dimension, and this sort of goes to the greater good. It opens up beyond that, advancing openness. So a radical increase in the amount of openness and in open models, and to add that to, as sort of a third leg of the stool. When we think about collective action and acting as a whole, then we say the third step there, create a picture and measure. So we have a picture, say, of the University of Michigan. We have a picture of Penn State University. There's a picture of Rutgers. We say, how do we create a picture of the Big Ten Academic Alliance as a whole? The amount of OAs, a green OA, gold OA, et cetera, how that picture has changed over time. So going all the way back to 2000, and so let's take it up to the present, 2020. Where does the Big Ten Academic Alliance fit as a strategy compared with different regions, with different countries, with different areas of the globe? And being able to measure over time. And then that fourth step is assessing, reflecting, and adjusting course. None of us know what this looks like. We're imagining new systems. We're imagining new models. This is this essential question: how do we know that we moved the needle on OA? How do we know that our actions made a difference? And we need to have a rhythmic assessment to be able to look back and say, these are putting strategies in at a high level. There's many different metrics. How can we look at a strategy and measure whether it made a difference or not? And if we can look back and say it didn't have the impact that we hoped it would, then we adjust and we change. So that's a quick high-level view of sort of that strategic level for a collection of institutions. Then Sarah, you want to take away the next piece?
Yeah, so what is my next slide, Charla? Do I have another slide? I don't, right? It's just this one? Okay, sorry, perfect.
This one.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Again, so nice to see so many familiar names on the screen, hopefully faces too. To sort of tag on to this idea of working as a collective, I was on a panel yesterday where we were kind of trying to define terms and think about communities. And fundamentally, I think a big shift that PLOS has been taking in the last 2 years or so has been reevaluating what communities we need to be engaging with, however you define communities. And one of them was really that in the midst of this transformational period where consortia are trying new things. What Charlotte is going to talk about, the area Lyricist is waiting to, feels very new for consortia. Publishers need to be doing the same. And given PLOS's role in perpetuating the current APC Gold Open Access business model, we really feel it's incumbent upon us to help that transformation continue to other kinds of business models. And so that's been a really key component of the work that we're doing around the kinds of models you see on the screen. So really from the partnership perspective, we've been approaching libraries in the last 18 months and basically asking them, with respect to open access, the value that you see in open access, both from the mission perspective, but also in terms of, what you're trying to actually achieve for your authors. What are your priorities? What do you need to see? What's not working? And based on all those conversations, we not only determined that flat fee type models were actually quite valuable in a lot of contexts, that an actual collective action model could have some legs as well. And so PLOS Community Action Publishing, or CAP, is a collective model that's predicated on this idea that community supported efforts between libraries and publishers, and ideally between a larger stakeholder group than that, funders to other kinds of institutions, can lead to sustainable open access publishing in a variety of different ways that doesn't rely on this barrier that authors face now in terms of paying a fee. So in terms of those partnerships, they really have to be focused around radical transparency with libraries. We have to lay all of our cards on the table in order to have a real partner dialogue. Internally, we've had to build a entirely new business ecosystem, which has been a hell of a learning experience. It's not easy to shift from a retail sort of business to a wholesale one. So I'm happy to talk about the challenges of that shift. And then fundamentally, you know, in many ways, this is existential. Small independent publishers have the next 3 to 5 years to find a way to work with consortia and libraries globally to come out of the other side of this transitional period. And so hopefully the kind of work that we're trying to do is seen as valuable with consortia. And that's why it's nice we're still doing this conversation that we started last year at Charleston. So I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So Lyrasis is not new to facilitating collective action to support open access initiatives. We've served as the national contact point with partners Scope 3, Knowledge and Lash, and Open Library of Humanities for many years. And we are continuing to learn a lot about what works and what does not in sustaining open access through these partnerships in particular. But recently, we started collaborating with small mission-aligned publishers to provide an incubator space for next-generation open access models. And so in September, we announced our partnership with Duke University Press to facilitate contributions to flipping the journal Demography to open access. Demography is a leader in the field of population studies and until the end of this year, published under a paywalled subscription by Springer Nature. The New Diamond open access funding model relies not just on financial support from libraries, but also research centers and other non-library organizations that rely on global population research. So especially now, we cannot ask the library community to fund the entire open access transition alone. In that vein, this model intentionally invites multiple stakeholders to participate. In October, Lyrasis announced another new partnership with Central European University Press to help them transition to an OA monograph program through their newly formed library membership initiative called Opening the Future. The new OA publishing model gives Opening the Future members access to a selection of CEUP's extensive backlist, DRM-free, and with perpetual access to this backlist collection after 3 years of investment. The membership revenue will be used to make newly published books openly accessible to anyone. When the annual revenue target is met and the entire monograph front list is openly accessible, future membership fee rates can then be lowered. Along with Lyrasis, other partners supporting the initiative include the COPM Project, Project Muse, and OAPEN. This model is the brainchild of Dr. Martin Paul Eve from Open Library of Humanities, and the initiative is being led by Francis Pinter, creator of the Knowledge Unlatched model, who is now at CEU Press. This program is not only testing a new model to transition monographs to open, but it is also testing the viability of collective, cooperative, and sustainable support across multiple mission-aligned, community-oriented organizations to sustain open scholarship. With multiple stakeholders acting together to develop and test new models, as well as collaboratively invest funds, it stands to reason that those we serve will have access to more diverse content than they would by us acting alone. So as the transition to open continues, more of these types of programs will need an administrative home that aligns to their missions. However, the one-off nature as to how these programs are presented to potential investors and how one can invest in them is not conducive to easy administration by consortia or to participation by libraries, as the vetting and procurement process will become more complex and onerous the more programs there are. So it's just not enough to tell everybody, let's work together, when the process to invest in the programs acts as a barrier itself. We need more coordination. This kind of coordination requires collective agency through and through. If you want collective agency to be successful, you must facilitate collective agency. If you want your funding models to be equitable and inclusive, you have to embed equity and inclusiveness in every part of the business model and mechanism used to capture the funding. Whatever outcome you're looking for, whether it's equity, diversity, inclusion, it must be embedded within the entire culture and infrastructure that you use to support that outcome for it to be authentic and sustainable. We need a radical new form of cooperation that facilitates the community we want to be. So, Lyricists, in radical cooperation with a cadre of librarians and mission-aligned publishers, are developing a new values-based program just to do that. This new program is a community-driven single entry point that allows multiple stakeholders to vet and fund scalable open access content initiatives. We're calling it the Lyricist Open Access Community Investment Program, and it will be designed to equitably connect multiple stakeholders in the scholarly publishing landscape, including funders, institutions, libraries, authors, editors. It will facilitate an experimental and incubation space for emerging open access funding and business models. It will centralize the administration and funding of open access initiatives or programs at multiple scales and make transparent to the community at large who is participating in each investment community. It will provide a funding hub for more bespoke programs, output from smaller publishers, and niche scholarly output in order to maintain diversity of scholarship. It will enable investors to strategically fund individual programs or distribute funds to multiple programs that align with their missions all in one place, increasing efficiencies and conveniences. And then finally, it will help investors put their money where their mission is by encouraging mission matching between the investor and the program in order to build and maintain trust and integrity. Before the end of the year, Lyricists, in partnership with Transitioning Society Publications to Open Access, or TSPOA, of which I'm a member, will announce a pilot to test the viability, scalability, and sustainability of the proposed program. We are beginning this pilot with a Society OA journal published by a U.S. university press needing sustainability funding, as well as another journal leaving a large commercial publisher in order to flip to open access. We will explore a community-vetted crowdfunding approach by having the publisher answer various criteria questions on behalf of the participating journal. The answer to these criteria will be the basis for investment decisions by investors, such as libraries, but also any other organizations who wish to participate. So if this pilot proves the concept and the program is formalized, it has the potential to result in a web-based service to support information transfer, promote a diverse array of open access programs seeking investment, manage secure transactions, and provide return on investment reports to users. It will also be interoperable so that other consortia or groups around the world can manage their own instance at their local level, but connect to a global community investment portal for programs that exceed political boundaries and scale. By design, it will engage all stakeholders in the research and scholarly communication ecosystem in order to initiate and sustainably maintain the participating OA programs. But ultimately, our hope is to rally those who are ready to challenge the status quo and replace it with the reality that is vastly more conducive to our deep-seated human need to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, to build communities of grace. If we believe in a world in which all scholarship is equitably available to all who wish to access it, and if we believe that current stakeholders, the likes of libraries, higher education administrations, scholars, publishers, funders, are the ones who can deliver on that vision, then it is our collective responsibility to equitably connect, educate, and empower those who are committed to leading in a way that will more likely bring that vision to life. So thank you. And I think Sarah, if you can do questions because I cannot see, but I will.
Absolutely. So Stacy's got a question, Stacy Burke. Does this open access community investment program only consider fully OA journals, or would hybrids from societies be in consideration?
Oh, you know, I don't know. We're just starting. And so I think more than anything, what we're looking for are those who are mission aligned. I think for hybrid, I think it all depends. We're trying to focus on nonprofit publishers at first. And, you know, depending on how this, it has to to develop at a scale that we can manage administratively. You know, Lyris, although we have an infrastructure to do some things at large scale, managing them, like it's just me, along with my team who assists that might be doing some of these programs and making sure that they're successful. I will say I'm not closing the door on that, but right now we're just starting with these two, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Great question from Lisa on, for all three of us, how are we evaluating these efforts, both in terms of process and outcomes? Looking back in 3 to 5 years, how do we know if what we did today is successful?
So I could take a shot at that first. It's a really great question. I would say, you know, so I think the lead idea here is to make data-informed decisions, and as we're shifting this space to really be data-informed about what's successful and what isn't, so continuously measuring. And we may need new ways of measuring our output. We got to look at economic impact, total spend, you know, the percent of open. There's several different metrics that we can watch. But the most important thing, I think, and to your question, is to establish the things are like, what do we care about? What are we trying to achieve exactly? And then to match up a few metrics with those things and watch them very closely. So what we're doing within BTAA is a few different things. So one is working with the COKI project, the Curtin Open Knowledge Initiative. It's based on building open source software, working with open data to be able to create dashboards that can report on metrics across time. So what's our publishing output, what's our spend, where are faculty publishing, what's the percent of that that's open, and a variety of different metrics, so that when we articulate, here's the things we care about at a high level, we can watch those metrics at a broad level. We need to watch very specifically with specific business models too. So for example, the PLOS Community Action Program, when a publisher can step forward and say, hey, look, we're trying a different model. None of us know quite if this is going to work, but here's a model we'd like to try it and pilot it, so that we can take those, go a small scale investment. It's too big to try to tackle the entire field, right? So let's take a couple of them, bring our principles to that and say, here's what we're trying to achieve, and then achieve specific metrics that are coming out of that specific program that we can watch at that small scale as well, and say, and we continue to say, did that work? Did that work? Can we try it this way? And really develop an active partnership in how we create these models, because no one can do it alone. We have to enter into partnership and have a really open dialogue about how we work with these business models and how we're each measuring them and what we're trying to achieve, because it's really going to be matching up those priorities and mutual goals that are going to get us to, we're inventing something new, we're creating something new. So that's like, in 5 years, we can look back and say, yeah, we did move it. We changed it according to our goals and our priorities, and we created a new world that we wanted to see.
Yeah, similarly with PLOS, I think that's right. That kind of constantly iterating approach, the work is never done, being transparent about reporting how it's going. I think to your point, Morris, you have to start with saying what you want to achieve. You know, with a community action publishing model, we want these journals to cover their cost. We want members to see redistributed revenue overages once we reach the revenue cap. Ideally, in a perfect world, that model would then be used by other parts of PLOS, other organizations outside of PLOS. I think one way of looking at, for example, Subscribe to Open and the success they've had there is so many other organizations have taken it up, which I think speaks to successes there. And, you know, I don't have any problem saying it, an important metric around both collective action and some of our other models is, do we bring authors back to us who perhaps have gone elsewhere? That's a really important consideration as we try to have a competitive offering to transformative agreements in globally that suddenly make publishing with us have a fee, and publishing via that transformative agreement now being free, which of course it isn't. But so I think there's a number of very specific things on the table that we want to report on at least annually for the community.
Since we
oh, sorry,
go ahead, Morris.
Sarah, just to build quickly on what you're saying, it's so important, and exactly, so like when we find those successful models and records of success, then to be in the spirit of open, very transparent and open, and say, this model worked, here's what we'd like to see more of, bring more of it, you know, and then we can continually deepen that investment over and over and spread the impact.
for there are so many programs that we're looking at, and so in some of these, since we might be the main main outreach focus for those programs here in the United States or even North America, they have revenue goals, they have sustainability goals that they're trying to meet, and so I would see success that they're at least meeting that. But as far as overall and what I want to see, the reason why I work in consortia, I love helping the library community try to meet their missions. And if that mission is for them to transition how they are investing their funds from paywalled content, heavily commercial publishers where not as much of that money is coming back into the scholarly community, if they're investing more, if the balance starts to shift, that's where I start seeing success. I also start seeing success where the libraries feel empowered, that even at the librarian level, they know what questions they should be asking now, and they know how to align whatever is important to their institution to the actions that they're taking in acquiring the content for their users. So, how you measure that, I don't know, but that's part of the program that we're trying to develop now, where we can have new levels of assessment that are outside of just the traditional metrics that we've been using for these kinds of programs.
Sorry, I keep doing that because the dog is acting up. So Esther has a question. I'm not sure if it's to all of us, but will publishing open access be available for authors from developing countries, or is this the luxury of the rich? How do you see this problem? Esther, feel free to clarify what you meant specifically there. I guess we can riff out to say the larger, perhaps another way of restating the question is, how are BTAA, lyricists, PLOS thinking about the challenge around institutions and individuals who can afford to pay into these kinds of models and those that can't? How are your organizations thinking about those?
Really excellent question. So just to take perhaps a quick idea about that. One is that, so the Big Ten Academic Alliance is made up of 15 R1 institutions. R1 institutions have a certain set of priorities. They have a certain publishing profile. It is about like those institutions and the faculty and researchers there themselves. However, each one of those institutions, we have many state institutions that are the flagships for their state. We have institutions that are where they have a public commission to the common good and to open knowledge, and they sit within their state consortia, and then within much broader profiles of institutions that range to to small colleges, different things like that, where we can have a spread impact on public knowledge itself. And I think what that does is we can carefully watch and measure that trajectory. It is so important to have these open effects towards developing countries globally. This is an incredibly important movement. There's a wide profile of scholars, of researchers, of institutions, public knowledge that we need to pay careful attention to. And I think the hope is to start small and local where we are and to spread out towards real impact towards public knowledge and accessibility broadly.
Charlotte, before you jump in on an answer there, I want to flag a great question from Eric around lyricists' role as a central standardizing entity when it comes to the challenges around infrastructure and having one publisher having to build things for 50 different institutions. Does lyricists see itself having a role there in terms of being a centralizing focal point on infrastructure? Eric, let me know if I got that wrong.
I think one thing to clarify about the vetting, that a lot of that has been going on at an individual level of institutions who want to have their own checklist, but other groups out there are starting to try to put together a kind of a standardization that maybe the library community can adopt as far as how they evaluate who they invest in. This vetting mechanism is not a right or wrong answer. This is what it is it's a template that allows publishers to tell their story using a template in a way that libraries can figure out, whatever questions that they're asking, those answers will be in there. And then they can evaluate on their own based on their own checklists as to whether or not that's something that they want to align to. So it's a lot like a mutual fund, and the idea that it's going to be standardized as far as what information each publisher will provide. But no wrong answer to that. And the libraries themselves will be able to see the look each time for a publisher and then decide if that's something that aligns with what they want to invest in. So it's not that, it's not like Roger Schoenfeld's red light, green light, where, where we're trying to say, oh, don't go to this one or don't go to that one. It's more of, here's their story. They don't always know how to tell their story. So I'm hoping that we learn more about each other. We empathize with each other as investor, library, and publisher, and trying to understand what is it that we need to know about each other in order to maintain sustainability of relationships, so that scholarship is still out there. And as far as how that aligns to, open access is more than just access. There's so much more to it. And a part of that is, the diversity of authorship. The more open access the content is, then the more availability for authors to be able to participate from around the globe. So there is a cultural shift happening around this idea that if everybody has access, then what? Yeah. We ask that next question of, well, then what? Yeah. And we're creating a culture where we're asking that.
So I'm going to do a quick follow-up to that, because there was, I think, on the session with Lisa and Stacy that we did yesterday, and apologies if I'm confusing my sessions at this point, but we had been asked, if someone had been asking, if I want to invest in an open access effort because I have some savings from a renegotiation or a cancellation, is there a master place that tells me, these are all the open type, so this is what Lyrasis aims to bring? Is that an accurate example of what you guys we can go to you and go, oh, this is everything we should think about?
I wish. That is such a hard thing to do. And honestly, there's such a huge community of consortia out there in the United States, Canada, all around the world, over 200 of us out there that could work together to do something like that. But not everything is of importance locally necessarily. There are some initiatives that have a global impact and we all need to know about it. But there are some that are really important locally, and maybe that should be on that priority list at those institutions. We need to be able to customize. There is no one model that fits all. There is no one, where Lyrasis won't be the be all end all of this, and we don't want to be. That's a huge task that is impossible to do. We need to do it in collaboration with everyone else, which is why I want this program to be interoperable to other consortia, and so it meets their needs, but we can also work together, which is something that a lot of us as consortia already do with intraconsortial relationships. Again, the infrastructure exists. We're just trying to align the values and principles of open into that so that we can continue to do what consortia do.
So we're over time now. So I know folks are probably leaving the meeting to go to other sessions. We do have this lovely little 7-minute gap between sessions for kind of going up to the speakers afterwards and having a quick chat. So we can certainly use that. If folks have more questions, please either put them on the Pathable chat or in Zoom. I have a question for Morris that I'll throw out since we have a little bit of time, because I knew the three of us were going to have plenty to talk about. It sounds like BTAA is really thinking of acting as a collective in the more traditional sense of like all 15 of us are going to do something to make a point, and we know what it means for all those 15 institutions to do the same thing, and that brings a lot of negotiation leverage to the table. Am I hearing that right, or am I getting a little ahead of myself?
Absolutely. So, well, okay. So that is a complex question. Well, let's say, so in one sense, collective action means that we have common interests and we're working towards the same things. In another sense, it means we don't expect each other to all behave the same. And one thing about research institutions is they have very deep expertise, deep collections, deep research in particular areas. Their profile isn't the same. We can't expect each one of them to act exactly the same. So there's also a picture of let's bring each one of us bring our respective strengths towards the center and join those together to achieve something much greater together than we could as separate institutions. And one thing about the research profile and the character as well is think about each one of these institutions. I mean, we're talking about over 50,000 faculty, over 600,000 students. The research and publication collaborations are global in scale. So they're throughout the Southern Hemisphere, through the Northern Hemisphere, in every region of the world. So when we're talking about scaled global impact and what we can do together in order to change the business models and affect things at scale, that's genuine. You know, and that's how we can be talking a real way about being inclusive of focusing on the priorities of 15 institutions that are in North America, but really having a scaled impact that will have broad benefits across global economic spectrum. So not that we try to tackle those directly, because tackling the globe is enormous and really hard, but that by joining together, bringing our respective strengths to the center, and focusing on some very real outcomes, we can start to have scaled impact that is really visible on a global scale.
Yeah, we are in the midst of trying to make visible what's been invisible, right? I mean, and sometimes we don't know what the invisible is. It's all about asking the questions and putting all the cards on the table, right? Saying, this is what we're doing. What are you doing? And that's whenever the magic can start. And we start seeing gaps in what we can fill to move the needle, right?
Question from Stacy. Lyrasis is involved with Knowledge Unlatched. What about OA Switchboard? Perfect call out, as I think all three of us are involved in OA Switchboard. Do you want to share, each of you, what you're doing with OA Switchboard?
We're not doing anything with OA Switchboard at the moment. So yeah, we work with Knowledge Unlatched and on all the things that they do, but OA Switchboard not at the moment. Yeah, it's. I'm also seeing.
And we're.
Oh, go ahead, Maura.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I with the OA Switchboard, and we're exploring it as we're exploring several different models and things that can benefit. I think what we're examining OA Switchboard for, and PLOS, I think, is a partner in OA Switchboard, just in working with models, working with several different people and different models to say.
Oh, Morris, we've
examining that from
audio.
is.
We lost your audio there. Do you mind repeating that last part again? Try now.
Yeah. Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I coming through now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I think, yeah, we've looked at OA Switchboard from the perspective of benefit in scaled business processes rather than reporting. And it's like, how do we know what funding sits with our authors? How do we know what funding sits with the granting and funding institutions? And I think my audio may have gone again.
No, you're good. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So it's basically an active mechanism, and it's trying to shift the funding landscape and the way that the communication flows work, rather than necessarily reporting. So just personal opinion, and speaking as myself, I think OA Switchboard has a promising model for being able to enter into the landscape and contribute to us understanding how do we arrange a new workflow for establishing different flows of funding and a different publishing landscape.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Back to Eric's point around centralized infrastructure, certainly as a smaller independent publisher, I always forget PLOS is small. We have produced a huge number of articles, but it's a small organization. And so having a centralized open infrastructure effort that's being community led through OA Switchboard is going to be really important for us, because we can't do custom things, not only for each library, but for each sort of service provider that interacts with libraries. So we are hoping that OA Switchboard will help us out on reporting, on feeding metadata and content to institutional repositories. It's super early days, but we think it's an open partnership that's really important in investing in. And with that, we have a minute left. Should we call it?
I think so.
All right.
Otherwise, it will just shut off, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's really amazing to have so many people on for the chat. Hope everyone has a safe and well rest of the day. Charlotte, thank you. Morris, thank you. Brian, thank you.
Yes.